Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to study Control 5.9 Inventory of Information and Other Associated Assets. Before I explain you what exactly this Annexure Control 5.9 talks about, we will learn a little bit about what is an asset, why it is important, and why it is necessary to have an inventory of all the assets in your organization. So, first, let's understand what is an asset. What is an asset? An asset is anything valuable to the organization that contributes to achieving its business objectives and which requires protection. For example, your laptop is an asset because you're using that to achieve your business objectives, right? Your printer is a asset. Any documents, any processes, even people for that matter are asset to an organization. There are many types of assets, okay? Like there are software assets, your source code, your SSL certificates, your Git repository, CI/CD tools that you use. These are all the software assets. Now, there are physical assets like your laptop, your mobiles, your tablet, your printers, your physical servers, even office spaces for that matter is an asset to the organization. Anything that is physical, confidential documents that are printed, those printed documents become the asset of the organization. Next is the intellectual property, application designs, your algorithms, your trademarks, your trade secrets. Then it is the responsibility of the organization to protect it. Because what happens if your application designs are leaked, if your trade secrets are leaked, or your laptop has been compromised by an attacker, source code is leaked. All these are assets which are actually contributing to achieving your business objectives, and then that's the reason it requires protection. The primary focus of this control 5.9 is nothing but what information assets you have. Okay, just make a list of all the information assets that you have, where they are, who owns them, and keeping an inventory of them. So, inventory is nothing but a list or maybe an Excel sheet or maybe any file, maybe the file in a SharePoint or whatever. Make sure you maintain an inventory where you make a note of all the assets that you have A, B, C, D, whatever assets. Maybe you have laptops, servers, your cloud subscription, all those are an assets. So what assets you have in your project, make a list of it, put a owner who owns the asset, and then keep a inventory of the those assets in your organization. Why do you want to make an inventory of list? Because you cannot protect what you do not know you have, right? Only when you know that okay, these are the assets in my organization, then you can put some controls and then try to protect it. Maybe supposing you have a laptop, then you secure the laptop using so many things, right? You make sure that people log into this laptop using VPN, you have MFA enabled in it, you installed an antivirus software in it. So you will protect it, right? In the same way for the server also, you'll make sure that it is not publicly facing and it is having all these antivirus softwares, you're patching the servers regularly and all those things. So only when you know that you have these assets, you can make sure that you protect them. An organization must know what assets it has or what assets exists in his organization, where they are located, okay, and who owns them and how important they are. See, every asset can be categorized in different levels. Maybe some assets are highly confidential assets, or maybe, there are critical assets. And then some assets are not that critical assets. Maybe they are low. Now that we understand what is asset, it is very important to manage these assets properly, because the better you manage it, the better you can protect it. Let's understand what is asset management. See, asset also has a life cycle, okay? First you plan, like if in case, if your organization is planning of buying a new server to maintain all the information of the customers PII information, then they will plan, okay, which server we should buy. There's so many options available in the market, what meets our requirements. Based on that, you will select that particular asset. After that, you will go ahead and maybe you will send out RFP, then you will finally sign a contract with one particular vendor and you will start procuring those servers in your organization. After that, the operations will continue. And then sometimes, if it doesn't work, you also need to make sure that you maintain it by regularly patching it, by making sure that it is working fine. If there is any issues, and fixing it, all those things. So operations and maintenance you will do. But then there will be a time where you will feel that, okay, this server is no more required. Maybe, this server holds only 10 terabyte of data, but now your customers have increased and you decided to have two servers of 20 terabyte. Depending on the importance of that particular asset, you will give them the that kind of protection, right? Say for example, you have your printer, just a hypothetical example. So at that point of time, maybe you want to decommission it, or maybe this is defective now, so you want to decommission it. Then you will make sure that you decommission this device. Like this, every asset goes through this life cycle. And when the asset is going through this life cycle, even in these life cycle, one owner will be assigned to these asset. Okay, when it is in planning stage, maybe the manager will say, okay, I need these kind of devices. It will say to the sales team. And when it is in the acquisition stage, the sales team will own the device, right? And when it goes to the operations and the maintenance, the team which is working on this server will own that device. And when it goes to the decommissioning phase, maybe another team who deals with all the decommissioning of the devices, they will own this device. So like this, an asset also has a life cycle in itself. One team will be there in big organization to manage all these assets, but your job as an ISO lead auditor or lead implementer is not to see whether the asset management is working fine or not. All you need to know is the team has to make sure that they maintain an inventory of all the assets. They classify the asset as high, low, medium, whatever, based on their needs, based on the requirements, or based on the work that the asset is performing. And then there is an owner assigned to each and every asset. Always make sure that the asset should have an owner. Okay, it should not be orphan. I mean, it should not say that, okay, this asset is there, but then there is no owner assigned to it. It should not be the case. Make sure that all these things are followed. So you know that it is a printer. We understand it can print it, but it is not that a very critical device, right? Or a very high critical device for that matter. But if you are having a server where you maintain all customer information, you have a database inside the server and you're maintaining all the PII information of the customer, then this is a critical server for you. If this server goes down, your business will get affected. Like this, you have to categorize each and every asset. Based on the importance of the asset, you have to categorize whether it is a critical asset, high asset, medium asset, or low asset. So this is an example of an asset list, or you call it as an asset inventory. It is one and the same. This is how the asset list looks like. You have to give the name of the asset, what type of information it holds, whether it is software, hardware, or it is a cloud device, whatever, what type of that information it is. Then give a small description about that asset. For example, if it is a source code repository, then just say that this application source code is and branches are contained in this repository, and who owns it, that is the development manager owns this repository, where it is located, how are you classifying it, whether it is confidential, whether it is internal, whether it is public, and the criticality also you can mention, and you can give the status, like status is like whether it is active or whether sometimes the devices do get decommissioned. So at that point of time you can just mention decommissioned, or if it is still active and it has been in use, then you can put it as active. Then review date is quarterly, like every time you have to come back and see, every quarter or yearly, depending on your program or depending on your process, you can come back and revisit this asset list and say, is this asset still being used, or do you don't need it? If you don't need it, you can decommission it. If you need it, you can continue using it. Okay, that's how you have to have a review date. So here in this case, every quarter you will come and check whether the source code is really required or not. For example, here, the developer laptop. Now, this laptop is assigned to John for that matter. Then this is a hardware device. So annually you will check whether this device is still being used by John, or sometimes if John has left the organization, then it has to be reassigned, right? So this asset list should be reviewed annually or quarterly or every 6 months, depending on the process that you hold. But whenever you review it, put a date saying, okay, on this date has been reviewed. It is very important to review this asset list every now and then, because sometimes, as I said here, for example, John left the organization, or sometimes the device itself becomes defective. At that point of time, you decommission it and then bring a new device with a new serial number. So at that point of time, you have to update your asset list as well. Not only the person who's owning the device, sometimes the device owner also can get moved out of the project, or a new project manager can come who's taking over those assets. So it is very important that you maintain this asset and review it very regularly. This is how an asset inventory looks like. Let's read the clause and understand what exactly it says line by line. See, the control says an inventory of information and other associated assets, including owners, should be developed and maintained. So, what it is saying is you have to maintain an inventory of all the assets and all the information that you hold. It could be an intellectual property, it could be a software, anything, hardware, whatever it is there, put an inventory of assets, like asset number one, number two, number three, number four. So, what is the asset name? Give the name of the asset. Maybe it is a database server. Okay. Who owns it? The database admin owns it, or the database manager owns it. What is the severity or criticality of this device? And you can say it is confidential or it is high, whatever. Okay. And when are you going to review this? Every quarterly, we are going to review it. The control does not say that you have to have it in an Excel sheet. You can have it somewhere in the SharePoint. You can have it somewhere in a Confluence page. These companies, they just use the ServiceNow tool, and then whenever you need the assets, it will just take a report of all the devices. At that point of time, you can show that also as an asset inventory. That also works. But the whole idea is that you have to maintain an inventory of all the information and the associated assets that you have in your organization. What is the purpose of having this control? The purpose is to identify the organization's information. So, as I said, when you know, you can try to fix it, right? If you do not identify the asset, how will you fix it? So it is very important for you to identify the information and other associated assets so that you can preserve their information security and assign appropriate ownership, so that these assets, whatever you identify, you can give a owner to these asset, and then you can maintain the security of this asset. That is the reason why you should maintain an asset inventory. It also talks about much detail about the inventory. The organization should identify its information and other associated assets. So whatever information, like for example, you're having the application code. What are the associated assets with it? Where you are storing this? You're storing in the GitHub repo. So GitHub becomes your one of the assets. So all the associated assets, whatever information you have and the associated assets, and determine their importance. So it is saying, I told you, right? You have to understand the criticality of the server. whether it is high, low, medium. You have to understand the importance of the assets in terms of information security. How will you understand whether this is of high importance or low importance depending on the service that asset is providing? For example, this repository is having my application code. So definitely if this should be high, right? If the application code itself is not working, or if it goes defective, or due to some reason if it is not working, then it will affect my business, correct? So it is important for me to identify the importance in terms of information security, also how important it is to secure this asset. Documentation should be maintained in dedicated or existing inventory as appropriate. It says that you maintain a documentation where you keep a track of all these assets. It could be a dedicated inventory, or you have to any existing inventory. If you have existing inventory, just add this new server to that, but make sure that you have the inventory updated and maintained. The inventory of information and other associated assets should be accurate. I told you, right? Whenever there is any change, come back and update your asset list, asset inventory. So it should be accurate. So whenever an auditor comes and you're saying, no, this asset is no more there in our environment, we have decommissioned it. But in your inventory, you're saying that it is still active. So it should not be like that. It should, your asset inventory should always be accurate. It should always be up to date, consistent, and aligned with other inventories. So what is this line says? Align with other inventories. Align with other inventories means, see, if you have not watched my risk register video, go ahead and watch that video. I'll just give you a little bit of what risk register is. So in a risk register, you will maintain, right? Okay, this asset, say asset database server, your database server is having a risk that you have identified, correct? Now you'll put he is the risk owner, and you will give the name of the database server or also. Now, in your asset list also, this database server should be there, and it should have the same serial number, and it should have the same owner. It should have the same criticality also, the importance. Okay, so it should be in alignment with other inventories also. That is what it is saying. Not that this server is having a different serial number here, different serial number here. It is saying that it is critical server, but here it is saying it is low server. This mismatch should not happen. So it should be in alignment with other inventories. Options for ensuring accuracy of an inventory of information and other associated assets include. So, how do you ensure that there is accuracy in your inventory? Conducting regular reviews. You have to conduct regular reviews of your identified information assets. Whatever assets that you have identified, make sure you regularly review the asset inventory. Maybe every quarterly you want to review it. It doesn't give you any hard and fast rule saying, okay, you have to review it every 6 months or every quarter or every year. It doesn't say that. But all it says is you conduct regular review and see whether those assets still existing, whether the owner is the same, whether uh, the criticality still remains the same. For example, the database server that you have, maybe this was holding PII information, but now the project which where you were dealing with all PI information has gone. So now you have deleted all the PI information from this. So if this is not holding any PI information and you're not using the server for your any of your critical business requirements, then you can reduce the criticality of this to low. At that point of time, you have to come back and update your asset list. You can regularly review your asset list. Sometimes the manager can move out of the project. Sometimes the employee for whom the asset was assigned to is no more in the organization. So you need to keep a track of all these changes and update your inventory. Automatically enforcing an inventory update in the process of installing, changing, or removing an asset. In some companies, what happens is, your other tools are actually automatically getting updated. For example, if you're having ServiceNow, and in ServiceNow, the status will be there. Okay, if you put it as decommission, then this service now is linked with your Confluence or maybe with your Jira, whatever. At that point of time, Once you put your decommissioned here, in Confluence pages also, it will automatically get updated saying as decommissioned. So like this, if possible, you can automatically enforce an inventory update in the process of installing. Whenever a new device is done, comes up, automatically Confluence page and Jira is created for it. Like this, any changes or any removal or any installation of an asset happens, try to enforce a automatic update of your inventory. If it is possible, do it. If it is not possible, also it's automatic updating is not possible is also okay. As long as you can show that you are manually updating your inventories is fine. Now, this control talks about little bit of ownership also, how important it is for an asset to have an owner, and what are the duties of an owner, and how you maintain your ownership. For the identified information and other associated assets, ownership of the asset should be assigned to an individual. So every asset, say for example, the same example, the database server, right? He should have an owner. It can be an individual person, or you can say database team for that matter. You can say database team is the owner, right? It's okay. An individual or a group, and the classification should be determined. The classification, whether it is critical, high, low, medium, that should be determined. So this is mandatory. If this is not there, then it becomes as a non-conformative. So have these detailed in the asset list. The process to ensure timely assignment of asset ownership should be implemented. So whenever an asset is being created, an owner should be assigned, right? So it says that ensure timely assignment. So when a asset is being created, make sure within 10-15 minutes or within a day an owner should be assigned. Not that it is just lying there and no one is the owner. So you should make sure that there is a timely assignment of ownership to this asset that should be implemented. That kind of process should be implemented. Ownership should be assigned when assets are created. The moment it is created, ownership should be assigned, or when assets are transferred. Sometimes what happens, the same database server will be used by multiple teams, or maybe this database server is now not used by project A and will be used by project B. So even in those cases when an assets are transferred to the within the organization, even at that point of time, you have to make sure that there is a proper ownership there. Asset ownership should be reassigned. So whenever there is a transfer of an asset within the organization, the ownership also should be reassigned as necessary. When current asset owners leave or change job roles, even at that point of time, you have to make sure that you're reassigning the ownership. This is very important. Now, after ownership, it talks about owner duties. If I am the owner of any particular asset, what are my duties? It says that the asset owner should be responsible for the proper management of an asset. And how can he be responsible for the proper management of an asset? Throughout the life cycle of an asset, remember I talked about the life cycle of an asset from planning to decommissioning. So, throughout the life cycle of the asset owner will have certain responsibilities. What are the responsibilities? Information and other associated assets are inventored. Means keep your asset inventory updated. Whenever there is a new asset, go ahead and update it. Whenever a asset is getting decommissioned, go ahead and remove it. Information and other associated assets are appropriately classified and protected. That means what? Whenever an asset is there, make sure you give a proper classification, high, low, medium, whatever you want to classify based on the business requirements, based on the service that the server or the asset is providing. Based on that, you classify the asset and then protect it. It is your duty to make sure that your asset is protected. For example, if it is a database server and people are logging into it, have you made sure that MFA is enabled? Have you made sure that the patching is done regularly on the server or not? Are you making sure that vulnerability management is taken care or not? So it is your duty to make sure you protect the asset also. And then the classification is reviewed periodically. So what happens, as I said, sometimes the classification also changes. Today this device can be a high critical device, but tomorrow it can change. So review it periodically. Components supporting technology assets are listed and linked. So all the technological assets are also listed and they are linked, such as database, storage, software components, and subcomponents. So supposing this is a database server. Now, if this database server is talking to any front end server or any other API um, application server, then make sure that even those components are all covered in your inventory list. Requirements for the acceptable use of information. So, you know what is acceptable use of information? See, whenever you go to office, they'll give you one laptop. They'll assign a laptop or a desktop to you, and then you'll have to sign an acceptable use policy, right? What is this acceptable use policy? It says that I will use this laptop only for office purposes. I will not install any unnecessary software on this laptop. I will make sure that I do not, mishandle this laptop. So you're actually accept you accepting the device, right? So that is the acceptable use policy. So like this, even the assets, whatever are there, requirements for the acceptable use of information and other associated assets are re-established. So you have to tell the owner, okay, it is your duty to make sure that the database server or whatever asset that you are becoming the owner of, it is your responsibility to make sure that accept they follow the acceptable use of that information or that particular asset. Whatever the acceptable use is, they have to use that asset for that particular purpose only. So it is the owner should make sure that the requirements for the acceptable use of information or the other associated assets are well established, re-established. It is the duty of the owner to make sure that the requirements for the acceptable use of asset is being established, and if required, re-establish it properly. Access restrictions. Not everyone should have access to your asset. Corresponds with the classification. If it is a high classification uh, device or an asset, then access restrictions should be depending upon the classification level. If it is a low, then you can give, okay, everyone can have a view access or whatever. So it is upon you to decide what access restrictions you will give based on the classification of the asset. And you also have to make sure that they are effective and are reviewed periodically. All the access that is given to this device are effective, and it should always also be periodically reviewed. All the access restrictions that you give to people, okay, it is your duty to make sure that the access is restricted and it is given based on the classification that the asset is carrying. And these access restrictions should be effective. If you're saying that MFA is there and people are bypassing the MFA, doesn't make sense. You have to make sure that MFA is strictly being used. And all these controls, whatever you apply, access restrictions should be periodically reviewed. You have to come back and see, okay, no one is logging into your server, who all is logging into your server. It is your responsibility as a owner. It is your responsibility to check whether there are proper access restrictions and it is reviewed properly or not. Information and other associated assets, when deleted or disposed, are handled in a secure manner and removed from the inventory. So what happens is sometimes some assets, right? For example, let's take a backup server. Now, this backup server, from your production server, every 30 days, you will move the data, right, to your backup server. Now, this backup server itself also has full, maybe like say it has 10 TB of space. Now, this is full. So now this information in this backup server has to be deleted, right, or it has to be disposed. So it is your duty to make sure that if you are the owner of this backup server, it is your duty that the asset is deleted properly. It is when the asset deletion is being done securely. Okay. So whenever you delete an asset, you will have like, see, okay, say this is a backup server. As per our policy, the backup server can be deleted when it is full. And the data which is more than 1 year only should be deleted. And you should have a proper approval in place to delete it. There should be a change should be raised before deleting. Like this, you have to make a process before deleting. As a owner, it is your responsibility to make sure there is a process for deleting. or disposal. Say, so for example, this backup server itself is corrupted. You don't need it anymore because it is defective, right? So at that time, what process you will follow? You will say, okay, now this if this is defective, then we will give it for the person for dismantling it, right? At that time, what this team will do, they will crush the server into pieces, correct? Or they electronically, they will try to remove all the data, but before crushing it into pieces, you will electronically remove the information from this backup server. So there should be an approval in place. And whenever they are crushing the server into pieces, one person should be there who would sign up the document saying, yes, I was here when this server was crushing into pieces. So how you dispose the server is also a process. So that is your responsibility, how you will dispose the server. That process also you have to define. So all those things should be handled in a secure manner. And after you do that, it has to be removed from the inventory. You have to update the inventory. Then what the owner should do, they are involved in the identification and management of risk associated with the assets. If you identify that there is an risk in that asset, then it is your responsibility to make sure you identify the risk, you mitigate the risk, or you manage the risk. It is your responsibility. For example, our database server, we identified a very big vulnerability, very critical vulnerability in this server. Then it is your responsibility to make sure that the server is going through regular patches so that you identify the risk. And then once you identify the risk, it is your responsibility to manage the risk. Whether you treat it, whether you accept it, whether you avoid it, it is your responsibility. They support personnel who have the roles and responsibilities of managing their information. So you can also they support personnel who have the roles and responsibilities of managing their information. So if there is, sometimes one asset owner will be there, but many people will be using it. So at that point of time, you have to support those people who have the roles and responsibilities to managing those information, or managing those servers, or using those information which is there in those server. It is your role and responsibility to help them as well, because sometimes the server will not be working or it has some defect. Then you must always be there to support them. Apart from this, there are some other information that this control talks about. What it says is, inventories of information and other associated assets are often necessary to ensure effective protection of information. So why are we doing all this? Why this inventory of information is why this inventory of asset is important? So that we can effectively protect the information, and can be required for other purposes such as health and safety and insurance and financial reasons also. Sometimes these devices, these assets, we save these assets because of many other reasons as well. Inventories of information and other associated assets are also support risk management, audit activities. So these assets list, right? This inventory of assets, they also help in risk management, because you can see what are the risks associated with each and every assets. Your audit activities, vulnerability management, incident response, recovery planning. In all these stages, this asset inventory will be really helpful. Tasks and responsibilities can be delegated. See, as a owner, you can assign the task and responsibilities, right, of this particular asset. You can have a custodian, for example, a custodian looking after the assets on a daily basis. You can have it, but the person or a group who delegated them remains accountable. See, if I'm a manager and I have an asset, say my database server, but I'm giving my team members the responsibility to manage it. But if anything goes wrong on the server, I am accountable. That is what it says. Who delegates them remains accountable. So it is my responsibility as a owner, because I am the owner. I hold accountability for anything that goes wrong with the asset. It can be useful to designate groups of information and other associated assets which act together to provide a particular service. So whenever there is group of assets that combine together to provide one particular service, the owner of this service is accountable for the delivery of the service. So the owner will be responsible to make sure that this device is providing the service which it is decided for. It has to provide the service. Sometimes what happens, multiple services come together to provide one service. At that point of time, if I am the owner of this service API gateway, I should also make sure that other associated services are also working as expected, because the owner of this service is accountable for the delivery of the service, right? So including the operations, I have to make sure not only the asset is fine, but the service which it is decided to work, or the function of that particular device. Say if this is at the API gateway, I should not only make sure that the API gateway is fine and there is an owner and it has been classified, but I also have to make sure that it is working as expected. Whatever service it is decided to perform, it has to perform that. That is what it says. It can be useful to designate groups of information and other associated assets which act together to provide a particular service. In this case, the owner of the service is accountable for the delivery of the service, including the operation of the assets. And then it gives you uh, two ISO standards. If you want, you can go ahead and read these ISO standards. If you want more information on IT asset management, and any additional information on asset management, go ahead and read these ISO standards. I will not get into it. Hope this is very clear now. If you have any doubts, please drop a message or a comment, and I'll try to reply to those comments. Do let me know how you are finding these videos. If you have any feedback, do provide me those feedback. It will be really helpful for me. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.